If you keep pushing the envelope and keep militarizing the streets, sooner or later, you could have a massacre.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to George Conway Explains It All to Sarah. I'm Sarah Longwell, publisher of the Bulwark, and because I am definitely not a lawyer, I've asked George Conway from the Society for the Rule of Law to explain the illegal news to me and to you every week, and we are back. Hey, George, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing, Sarah?
Good. We had a cool live show in D.C. this week. We missed you there. We're going to be in New York on Saturday. Can't wait to see all our friends from New York. But first, before we go to New York, we've got to go down to the Eastern District of Virginia, where James Comey pled not guilty and Letitia James got indicted, which is our big breaking news of the week. But before we get into all of that, can you remind me who the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia is and why the Eastern District is now the administration's preferred venue for prosecuting political rivals?
Well, the actual answer to your question is that the United States, the Eastern District of Virginia, the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia is vacant. It has not been filled.
Oh.
There's this woman who has been signing documents there. Her name is Lindsay Halligan, and apparently she's some kind of insurance lawyer who's never practiced criminal law before. And she is going around masquerading as U.S. attorney, but she is not, in fact, the U.S. attorney because there are the things called statutes that Congress enacts. And one of those statutes basically says that you can appoint somebody temporarily to be, the attorney general can appoint someone temporarily to be a U.S. attorney in a district, but only for 120 days. And then the court gets to appoint somebody. And that happened. And there was a man named Eric Siebert. The president didn't much like him because apparently, according to news reports, he didn't want to indict baselessly Mr. Comey and Ms. James. And he was forced to resign, and he resigned. And there is then the government, the president or the attorney general purported to appoint Lindsay Halligan for a 120-day slot. But the statute does not allow that. The statute allows the district court to appoint someone at this point. And so she's not actually, and we talked about this before, she is not actually the United States attorney. That being said, she is pretending to be the United States attorney, and she has purportedly gotten indictments for Comey and Letitia James, and there will ultimately be a motion or two. I'm sure there'll be a motion, one in each case, to declare that she is not the lawfully appointed U.S. attorney, and that will end up being decided by a judge from another district who will be probably appointed by designation to sit temporarily in the Eastern District of Virginia, because since the Eastern District of Virginia judges are actually the ones who get to appoint U.S. attorneys under this statute, they are conflicted out of that decision. But that's the actual answer to the question.
Lindsay Halligan. Okay.
Lindsay Halligan, yes.
All right. Well, let's talk about Comey first, and then we'll get into Letitia James. So he had his arraignment this week. Unsurprisingly, he pleaded not guilty because he's not. Did we learn anything interesting from the arraignment, like either the strategy for the prosecution or any of that?
We learned that they found two lawyers from North Carolina, government lawyers, who knew nothing about the case, and they accompanied Ms. Halligan to the arraignment. And I guess they're supposedly going to be the line attorneys who are going to prosecute the case. And the reason why they had to bring those guys in was because nobody in this large office of 100 plus lawyers in the Eastern District of Virginia thought this case had any merit. So they had to go find somebody from outside the district who had no knowledge of the case to stand there with Lindsay Halligan and present to appear for the government at this arraignment. Other than that, what we learned, the most important thing that we learned is consistent with the Eastern District of Virginia's policy of being a rocket docket district where everything, criminal and civil cases, move quickly. The judge, Nachmaninoff, I think I pronounced his name right, but I have to get the name right, set a trial date for January 5, 2026, which is interestingly the day before January 6. I think that's going to be an interesting time. But and that's coming up very, very quickly. That's a fast, early trial date. It is one that I think Comey wanted. I think it was even faster than what Comey wanted. And then that means there are going to be motions very soon filed in the district court, and the motions will include selective prosecution, vindictive prosecution motions, saying that he basically was charged because he's exercised his First Amendment rights against to criticize the president, and that he is being singled out because the president does not like him, and there is apparently evidence to that effect. And then the other aspect of motions will be there'll be a motion for a more definite statement of the indictment. A bill of particulars is what it's called, because the indictment, as we've previously discussed, and you discussed it with Andrew Weissman, doesn't really specify what the crime is very clearly. And then there will probably be some other motions to dismiss on grounds of, it just plain meritlessness, although I don't know that will succeed. And there may be motions for discovery, to seek information about what transpired to lead to this indictment, particularly in light of the Truth Social post that Trump issued that said, "Hey, Pam, we need to indict Letitia and we need to indict Comey." And it turned out that it was really meant to be a direct message, but it was published out there to the chagrin of the Attorney General.
And can we pause on this for half a second, actually,
yes,
and just be like, in what world
does the President of the United States communicate with cabinet officers via direct messages on social media?
Not just any social media, his janky, gross, Truth Social with no security. You tweeted this. It was my first thought when I saw it before, which is because Trump is so addled at this point that when it first happened, it looked like a DM, but also it sounded like a crazy normal social post. Like the only thing that really indicated it was a DM was the direct conversation. But the idea that you don't think foreign adversaries can figure out how to hack Truth Social? I bet they can.
Well, that was my reaction, and I tweeted out when I saw that. I said, "Gee, I didn't know the president communicated with his cabinet officers via direct messages, but I bet you every intelligence agency worth its salt in the world already knew that." It's crazy, and it's even crazier than
selective prosecution, right? That's right, the point.
Right. Yes, the point in vindictive prosecution. They're all different doctrines with different elements that overlap, and there's just no question that these two individuals would not be indicted but for the intervention of the President of the United States and his personal grudges. And it's worse than that, right? It's worse than that because in the Comey case, it's been reported that the line prosecutors wrote a memo saying why the case was bullshit. And no other lawyers in that district, as I mentioned, were willing to put their names to the indictment or even to go into the grand jury room with Lindsay Halligan to present the indictment. And a similar situation appears to have unfolded in the Tish James case, where the line prosecutors, again from reports, the line prosecutors conducted an investigation and did not see a meritorious case. And again, that was that was the Letitia James. The refusal of the U.S. attorney, Eric Seibert, to bring the case against James, along with Comey, was the reason why he's no longer there. And what happens is he issues this Truth Social direct message as a post online to Pam Bondi. And what happens within a matter of weeks? The U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia is gone, and two of the people he mentions in the post/DM have been indicted. This is about, I mean, if this isn't a case of malicious, vindictive, selective prosecution, they might as well just take the doctrines out and throw them out.
I want to talk about the Letitia James case because on Thursday she was indicted. She's the Attorney General of New York. She was also indicted in this Eastern District of Virginia, where Lindsay Halligan is not the official person, but is there doing this. So James did run. So this one to me is slightly more complicated that I want to get into it with you. So James ran for Attorney General in 2018, promising to investigate Trump if she won. And as AG, she did bring a civil case against the Trump Organization that we talked a lot about on this pod. Now, what she is being charged with is bank fraud and making false statements to a financial institution. So the government is accusing her of violating a mortgage agreement on a Virginia house she bought in 2020 by using the house as a rental property. And the government says that by misrepresenting her intentions for the house, she received favorable terms that would have allowed her to save $18,933 over the life of the loan. A lot of reporting suggests that it's really unusual for the federal government to bring criminal charges for that small dollar amount. What say you?
It is unusual, but that's not the real problem of the case. The real problem of the case is going to be that they have to establish fraudulent intent in the mind of Letitia James, and they have to establish it with actual evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. And from what I've read, again, we have not seen the papers publicly, and we have not seen the evidence publicly. We've only seen reports about the evidence. I don't know where all that evidence has come from, but there are conflicting documents apparently in all of the mortgage papers. As you know, as anyone who's bought a house, you sign lots of different papers.
Let me tell you what, can I just say when you do this, you sit there and somebody's like, sign this one, sign this one, sign this one.
There's a little, right. There's a little, I mean, not that you should sign things that have false statements in them, but, there's a lot of text in there, and it's not entirely clear what some of that text means, and some of it may conflict with each other because each document has a different source and may use words in a slightly different way or different contexts or different purposes, which is one problem that apparently, according to press reports, the line attorneys had a problem with in trying to figure out if they could charge the Letitia James case. But another apparently is that it has been reported that there were emails to the broker and to other people from James or James's person or representative, but that acknowledged that this was not a secondary home, not an investment property. And so there's apparently just conflicting documents on what the documents don't necessarily jive with one another. And it's pretty clear, apparently, from the email correspondence that she acknowledged that she was getting this house as a secondary residence and that her grandniece was going to live in it. That's not necessarily inconsistent with it being a secondary property, because a lot of people allow their relatives to live in a second home. And it doesn't establish that this thing was an investment property, which is the argument. The argument is that she bought this purely as an investment property. And we all buy houses and things for multiple reasons, right? It may be a primary house. It may be a secondary house. All of it is probably, since we're investing a lot of money into it, we want these things to appreciate. And this was not, it does not have the indicia, from what I understand the facts to be, of being a purely investment property. The grandniece lived there. She's going to school there. So, and it's not, James paid all the mortgage herself. It's just not it's not a compelling case. It's a very confusing case. And it's hard to imagine that they're going to establish that she somehow intentionally deceived anyone about why she was buying the house in order to save money and to defraud a lender. It just doesn't make any sense. So, but we'll see the facts come out as they will.
So I have two questions. One sort of about, so with Letitia James, we get a very clear picture about what they're indicting her for. Why don't we have the same clarity with Comey?
My theory about that was that the Comey indictment was much more rushed than the Letitia James indictment. Because remember, the statute of limitations in the Comey case ran on September 30, 2025, because the testimony he gave that was allegedly perjurious was given on September 30th, 2020. So I think they went in there quick and dirty. I mean, within a couple of days of her receiving her invalid appointment, she was in the grand jury, and with this indictment that basically said very, very little other than the bare elements of the crime. It didn't even quote the testimony. It quoted 3 or 4 words from Ted Cruz's question at the congressional hearing to Comey, and then basically mischaracterized the answer. It's not the way you normally would write a perjury indictment. And but I think that was just driven by the fact that they wanted to get something done before the statute of limitations ran.
Okay, so that's one question. That makes sense, because I have been like, okay, so they can tell us the exact dollar amount that they think she would have stood, but we can't even like, we're all sitting around being like, we don't even know what he is claimed to have perjured himself on, really. I mean, we have sort of some idea, but it you have to read very closely, and like, there's still a lot of speculation in it. But anyway.
It sounds like this case, the Letitia James case, was very well investigated by the line attorneys who decided that there was no there. I mean, I think that's what this is all going to come out.
And so now they're like, okay, we're going to do this Mickey Mouse charge. But here's the one thing I wanted to say about the Letitia James indictment. There's a lot of commentary out there that's kind of in a turnabout's fair play vein, I would say, about her, that, you know, they're doing the no one's above the law if she broke a law. And here's when you and I talked about her indictment way back when, and not just hers, but Alvin Bragg's too. I was like, I hate those two. Those were not those two people, but the two cases. I was like, why? Why do we need this? It was, to me, it was like both unintentionally creating like a sense of, oh, there's so many cases, people can't keep track of them. Also, they were much weaker cases that likely would not have been brought against anybody else, right? And so, or just like they were, like, Bragg's was kind of a novel legal theory. Letitia James, it was like, if Trump hadn't been the president, like, he would not have been in the position where they were investigating him. I always thought that was clear. Now, you said at the time that made sense to me as I was complaining about this, because I was like, the January 6th stuff and the documents cases are so much more important. Like, we should focus on them. And you said, well, here's the thing. If you're going to break the law all over the place, like he has done with his organizations all this time, and then you run for president, like, you know that you're basically inviting people to look at you much harder. Like, yes, it probably wouldn't have been brought against somebody who just any sort of more, I don't know, white collar, lower level thing. Like, they wouldn't have made a big criminal thing out of the Trump organization stuff. But also, you know, if you're going to run for president and break a lot of laws, you know, people are going to get you for it, was kind of what you said. But do you have any feeling of, for her, the extent to which she went after Trump sort of in a different way than like like special counsel Jack Smith or something? What do you make of the turnabout's fair play argument from some people on the right?
Well, I'll allow the following. I don't like the fact, and I never liked the fact that Tish James mentioned Trump in the campaign and said that, she was going to prosecute Trump. On the other hand, I do stand by the idea that if you are a serial criminal, and I think Donald Trump is a serial criminal, and you put yourself out in the public realm, you are basically buying a case against you. And it's kind of interesting because I've ever told you the story about when Trump asked me whether you should fire the U.S. attorney.
Yeah, you have on the plane.
Yeah.
And it was Preet,
now
right?
I realize
Preet was that U.S. attorney.
Yeah, it is like now I realize he there. I think there was consciousness of guilt in that question. But you can't. The thing is the cases against Trump they were serious cases. I mean, remember, two very experienced prosecutors in New York working for Alvin Bragg thought the case should have been a criminal case. Now, the counter to that, and Bragg's point counter to that was that, this is this is very, very complex to present to a jury because there's just a lot of different things going on, lots of documents. Trump is insulated by lots of layers of people who are doing things for him. Some maybe corruptly, some maybe not. I don't know. And, these are complex, these are hard cases to bring, particularly against somebody who can finance a defense. So there's that. But this was a case where this case is manufactured. This case, I mean, if this were a real fraud case, right? If it were a credible fraud case, you didn't, where she, for example, the mortgage property didn't really exist or something. I don't know. She should get it. She should be prosecuted. But what's happening here is they just decided, hey, this is something that happens with a lot of people, and we can make an argument here. And it's not necessarily a strong case because there are inconsistent facts, and you have to prove intent beyond a reasonable doubt. But it's all attested to by the fact that it turns out, according to press reports, there are members of Trump's cabinet or other people in Trump land who basically have signed similar papers. And I think, we're probably going to hear more about that from the Letitia James defense in the coming months, that this is sort of we're going to pick the people and then we're going to look for these things that, they might have done because a lot of people do them, or you can make an argument that a lot of people do them. And that's what's different about this. And it's not, we talk Trump, remember, Trump, there's a whole pattern there of overstating the value of properties for purposes of seeking lending or insuring, and then undervaluing them for tax purposes. And then there's, of course, the fact that he never really pays a lot in federal income taxes, which makes you scratch your head. There's a lot of different things. I mean, I don't trust Donald Trump to do those things, honestly. And, that's a big difference. Although I do think it was not a great thing that Letitia James went out there and campaigned on, the idea of specifically charging Trump. But again, and that wasn't even a criminal case, remember?
Yeah. So. And to make it clear, I want to make clear two things. I really think it was bad that she did that. I really don't. Too. I think that bringing that case was a mistake. Certainly in retrospect, I think it's easy to say I think bringing that case was a mistake because I think it distracted from the much more serious cases. And I know he paid a fine, whatever. But I also want to be clear about the fact that her getting prosecuted for this is absurd. They are absolutely. No, this is one of the main things about find me a person and I'm going to go try to find the crime. And the thing that's happening is this mortgage fraud accusation of her is the same one they went after Lisa Cook for. It's the same one they're going after Schiff for. And it is the one that I think his name's Brian Pulte. You're going to have to, sorry, editors. But Pulte is definitely his last name. But he's the one who was raising this about them. And he's done the same thing. I think, and if you go through Trump's cabinet, lots of them have done it. Lots of them have multiple houses. They use them for different purposes. And, it's not always clear. And so it is a BS charge for sure. And so in no way am I saying like, I don't agree that turnabout's fair play on this one. I think it's nonsense, but I do think, you know, there is the way that the sort of has all played out is that the idea that there was a weaponization and lawfare used against Trump. She is one of the way that she campaigned on it and ultimately brought that case, I think, is the best example that people now who want to use it to obscure the criminal things that he did, right? They want to be like, oh, well, they went after Trump. And so Trump, you know, is within his rights to go after people. Like, no, they didn't.
Yeah. And the other aspect too is that, you know, real lawyers working at the New York Attorney General's office brought this case, all right? She didn't have to fire anybody to bring that case, as opposed to Trump, where basically you had the entire department, nobody in the Department of Justice wanted to bring the case. And you had to bring somebody who'd never been a prosecutor, who was working at the White House as a political hack or something of some sort, in to present the case before a grand jury, present both cases before a grand jury. And, you know, this is just, it's 100 times worse. If maybe even more than 100 times worse. It's crazy.
Let's talk about the fact that this show is sponsored by The Perfect Gene. I'm going to level with you. These are men's jeans. So I don't have any personal experience with these, but more and more of the guys I work with are wearing them and raving about them. And are you in them right now?
Yes.
Let's see. Stand up, guy. Let's see your. Oh, look at that. Perfect. Okay. Handsome. All right.
Perfect Gene.
How many pairs are you up to? You have a lot of those.
I have a lot of them. Yeah, I ordered a bunch.
Well, I've heard that these jeans are soft, stretchy, and fit perfectly. No more sucking in the gut during the button zipper battle. No more chafing or otherwise unflattering fits. If you're hard to fit, they have waists from 26 to 50 and lengths from 26 to 38. Those sizes are meaningless to me because I don't understand men's measurements. But The Perfect Gene is a fan favorite, not just with George, but with the producer who writes these scripts, who now has like 6 pairs of these, minus the one he gave away to a colleague who wanted to see what all the hype was about. But take it from them. These are some of the most comfortable, best fitting jeans you can find. The Perfect Gene always has free shipping, exchanges, and returns, so you can have peace of mind knowing that your order is completely risk-free. It's finally time to get rid of your uncomfortable jeans and go to theperfectgene.nyc. Our listeners get 15% off your first order, plus free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges when you use code AskGeorge15 at checkout. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectgene.nyc with promo code AskGeorge15. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them that we sent you. F your khakis and get The Perfect Gene. That is apparently we go through this every time.
JV has no fear of using.
He just uses the F-bomb.
He just says it. Yeah, he just drops.
I know. That. I go back
and the thing about private parts that they occasionally have.
They talk about what is like adjusting things. Whatever. Don't tell me. Don't tell me.
Crushing something or other.
Oh yeah, that's right.
They don't crush whatever you might want.
It is funny how crushed. The advertisers, the advertisers that like the guys out here or the young people that work with me that they get attached to, and The Perfect Gene is one of them. They are all in their perfect jeans. Okay, thanks Perfect Gene for that sponsorship. George, let's talk about the National Guard. So last week we talked about Trump's threat to deploy the National Guard to Portland and Chicago, which he has done, and a lot of other things have happened since then. On Thursday night, a federal judge in Illinois issued a temporary restraining order blocking Trump's deployment of the National Guard to Chicago. Judge Perry said, "I have seen no credible evidence that there is a danger of a rebellion in the state of Illinois." That sounds right. And then earlier this week, and this one's my favorite, a federal judge in Oregon issued 2 temporary restraining orders, or TROs, blocking the deployment of the National Guard in Portland. Judge Immergut was appointed by Trump in 2019, and she wrote, "The president is certainly entitled to a great level of deference, but a great level of deference is not equivalent to ignoring the facts on the ground. This court concludes that the president did not have a colorable, you're going to have to define that for me, but a colorable basis to federalize the National Guard because the situation on the ground belied an inability of federal law enforcement officers to execute federal law. The president's determination was simply untethered to the facts.
Sounds right to me.
Sounds right to me too.
Okay, so basically, as we've talked about, the relevant statute that allows the president to federalize the National Guard, whether from any state, and regardless of where he's deploying it, although it's really, really bizarre to take one from National Guard from one state and send it to another. Basically, you have to show one of three things. One is invasion, which they can't show. Two is rebellion, which is absurd. And three is the inability to enforce the laws of the United States through the regular forces. And that's the one really that they've been fighting about. And Immigrant wrote a great opinion, just an absolutely fabulous opinion, just describing how there just wasn't any evidence of that. And again, and the language that she's using actually is from the Ninth Circuit opinion that overturned part of what Judge Breyer had done in the Northern District of California a couple months ago. And they basically are saying that, and plaintiffs challenging National Guard's deployments actually like the language. The president does get some deference, yes. But the language is, there has to be in good faith. There has to be a colorable basis. You use that word.
What's colorable?
Colorable means arguable. It means like there has to be some semblance of an argument. And
so she's just saying there's like no semblance of an argument.
There's not. It doesn't. Right. She says it's untethered to the facts on the ground. She's basically saying it's untethered to reality, which is, basically all the statements being put out by the White House are virtually psychotic about Portland. I mean, we see videos of Portland. Portland looks perfectly normal. It's a beautiful, pleasant city. It doesn't have a lot of crime. And to the extent there's anything going on, it's just like a one block around an ice facility in the kind of a warehouse district in Portland. And there's a handful of people there and not really milling about. And okay, so let's suppose there is a scuffle, right? It's like that doesn't prevent ICE from enforcing the law. It doesn't prevent the president from the execution of the laws in Portland, Oregon. And it certainly doesn't prevent that without the use. It doesn't prevent him from bringing in regular forces. And there's no showing that regular forces can't deal with that. It's just absolutely multiple layers of just lunacy. And that's really what Judge Immergut said in very, very lawyerly language. That being said, it's on, the case was appealed. Oh, here's an interesting thing about Judge Immergut. A lot of people don't know this. She worked for Ken Starr in the Ken Starr investigation. She was at the Office of Independent Counsel for Ken Starr. She actually at one point took Monica Lewinsky's deposition. She was not a, she was basically kind of a law and order Republican, as I understood. But she was not hired for her political pedigree by Starr. She was hired because she apparently had experience in sex crimes. So she was good with dealing with witnesses, and that's why they wanted her to deal with Monica Lewinsky. But that's an aside. The case was appealed. The TROs were one of the TROs. The first TRO was appealed to the Ninth Circuit, and there was an argument yesterday. And it was before a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, which covers basically most of all the Western states. And there were 2 Trump judges and 1 Democratic appointed judge. One of the Trump judges was basically all in for the government, saying, well, the president doesn't the president get deference? The president wants to allocate resources the way he wants to allocate them. Well, who are we to stand in the way? Of course, the problem with that is there's an actual statute that says when the president can allocate resources that actually belong to a state and allocate them for federal purposes. But let's leave that aside. And then there was one Trump judge who was kind of Delphic. We don't know which way that judge is going to go. And then the other judge seemed very, very, was echoing points made in Immergut's opinion. So we don't know how that's going to come out. But we're waiting for that. But it should come out fairly shortly. But then there could also be, it could go to the half the court, or it could go to the entire court. It's a big court of 28 judges, and they have these things called en bancs.
Oh, en banc. I remember that.
Yes, right.
I mean, these district courts have been really good.
Yes.
And Trump hasn't defied the Supreme Court. Are these going to get up to the Supreme Court?
Yes, in some form or another. I think the way the administration keeps pushing these things, this is one of the issues that will ultimately get to the Supreme Court and probably on the shadow docket. And which is and I think, the problem with that is when they're coming up on these partial records, these rushed preliminary injunction records, the court kind of plays a little bit fast and loose with the record sometimes. And I'm not sure these are the best postures for these cases to come up but I think they're probably the only postures in which these cases will come up, because these are things that are relatively short fused.
So then the other thing that I've seen, sort of ironically, is that Trump is saying if these courts basically deny him the ability to do this, that he's going to invoke the Insurrection Act. Can he what? He's what? What does that do? Does that change how he can deploy troops domestically?
Well, it could in the sense that it would allow him to get around the Posse Comitatus Act, which prevents the use of federal forces for law enforcement purposes. But the Insurrection Act requires the showing of an insurrection. So it's not that dissimilar to the requirement in the statute that's now being litigated about, which allows for the federalization of state National Guards. So, I think the way to look at this is to take a step back. Is the Trump administration is doing I call them the 3 Ps. They're engaging in a lot of conduct here with respect to the national, and they were doing it in other areas as well, but I really thought of this in the context of the federalization of the National Guard and basically the federalization of the policing functions of the cities, particularly in blue states. They're engaging in pretext. They're making stuff up as a pretext to use federal forces. Secondly, it's performative. It's designed to show people on Fox News who have been convinced that Portland is on fire, that the president is doing something about it. So you get to see these guys wearing Kevlar vests and fatigues and armored personnel carriers rolling down the street in Portland. And the third P is provocative. They're seeking to provoke. It's a common thing in history that sometimes the use of force or the use of forces can provoke the very thing they are designed to prevent. I mean, the Boston Tea Party is an example. And what they are seeking to do here, I think, and this is the third P, is they want to provoke actual conflict so that then they don't longer have a pretext. Okay, they can actually then make a better argument and then so on and so forth and really have a snowballing effect. And it's all very dangerous.
I'm glad you brought this up, because can I just tell you one of the things we talked about this at the live show that we did in DC, because JVL is obviously rightly, he's sort of hair on fire about the fact that we've got the National Guards going into these cities. And, me and JVL's dynamic is that he says it's all ending. And I say, well, let me tell you why I think it's not all ending right now. And one of the reasons this idea.
So it's a shtick. You admit it's a shtick.
it's not that it's just shtick, it's like who we really are. It's just like it is how we are constantly engaged with one another. But the thing that has been interesting to me, and I noticed this in DC when the National Guard has been here, like we're in occupied DC right now, and nobody is giving them no one's being provoked. No one's like there's this video out of Portland, and it is people dressed up like a unicorn.
The frog. The frog. I saw an interview of the frog. The frog is dancing.
You're having a dance party.
One guy's dressed as a dinosaur, and he kind of approaches the ice guys, and the ice guys back up. It's hilarious. And so
we're sort of Americans, and like I was here, people like the ice. ICE was coming, they're dragging, there's a lot of videos, selfie videos people were taking of ICE grabbing like an Uber driver. And people were enraged about it here. But other than Sandwich Guy, like the guy who threw the Subway sandwich at the people who was, I think, a DOJ employee, or at least as a federal employee, no one is giving them pretext. Like I did the whole march here where we marched down to the White House and everybody basically was just like, boo, White House. But like nobody got in a fight with the people that were down there. And so like, it is interesting to me that Trump seems desperate to provoke something. And it's not because people are scared. They just seem like Americans seem to know that he's trying to do this and they're not taking the bait. Does that seem right to you?
That absolutely does seem right to me. But the problem is if you do this, the thing that's scary to me, and I think you've accurately described the state on the ground as it exists, is if you keep doing this with people running around with actual guns, sooner or later something's going to happen that's not good. I mean, and if you ever read about how tragedies happen in firefights, it's like somebody thinks they hear a gunshot. Or there is a gunshot. We don't know who fired the gun. Maybe it's one crazy person with a rifle who's trying to start something. And then a policeman fires back. And then other police think that there's a whole full, all of a sudden you have everybody shooting everything in every direction. You end up something with like a Kent State. And that's the scene. That's what scares me about all of this, is that at some point, if you keep pushing the envelope and keep militarizing the streets, and sooner or later, you could have a massacre that is just a consequence of the malevolence of the government and just the miscreants of individual officers or of somebody who wants to instigate something. And it could get out of hand very, very quickly. And that's a terrifying thought. And that's the thing that if there's something that keeps me up at night these days, I think we had talked about this. What keeps you up at night? That's it.
I think both things are very much true. Where, and I'm glad you brought that. Actually, pretext, performative, provocative. That's a good formulation because I think those are all right. Although I did think when you said 3 Ps, we were going to get to pedophile, but we didn't.
That is, yes. I mean, there is an Epstein angle to that. So if you want to make it the 4th P, I'm not against
protecting
that.
Pedophiles. Can always.
That's fine.
I feel like
now it's
always
5 Ps.
Yeah,
protecting,
that's right.
But, that's fine.
Okay, George, as always. Thanks for explaining the legal news and the illegal news to all of us. Hey guys, we will be back next week. I want you to hit subscribe on our channel. It super helps us out. You might not think it does. Leave us a review as long as you have something nice to say, and we will see you guys next week.
Well, George Conway, he's a man with a plan. Got to sit down with Sarah Longwell, take a stand, explain all the legal problems they're piling high. With Donald Trump, oh my, oh my, oh my. He said, Sarah, let me break it down for you. There's obstruction of justice, corruption too, the legal tangles and troubles, they're growing fast. It's a storm that's gonna last.